And so, hello there, and welcome to a new Night of the Movies podcast. And in these podcasts, I talk all things movies and TV, and whenever I want, for about half an hour to an hour, whenever I can at the moment. I was about to say once a week, but I'm not doing these podcasts once a week at the moment. It's whenever I can. And in this podcast today, I'm reviewing the newest season of Mandalorian and answering the question as to whether this is the worst season of Mandalorian yet. But before I get to that, I should say what I say at the start of every podcast I do, that if you are watching this podcast on YouTube, hello there to my viewers, but heck, you just don't have the time to watch the full podcast on YouTube, then you can also check the podcast out audibly on Spotify and Night Movies on that platform, and there will probably be a link to my Spotify account with this podcast in the description of this video below. But if you are listening on Spotify, hello there to podcast listeners, just move the mic a little bit there. Then you can also check this podcast out visually on my YouTube channel at Night of the Movies on that platform as well. Likewise, wherever you are watching or listening to the podcast, if you enjoy the podcast, please feel free to like and subscribe, and also leave some suggestions of things I can talk about in future podcasts, because very soon in the near future, it's coming up now, I'm not too far away, I'm going to have a lot more free time, so I'd love to get some more suggestions of things to talk about, because we'll be doing more podcasts very, very shortly. But yes, if you enjoy, of course, please like and subscribe, and come back for more whenever I have more coming in the future. Because just before I get into my review of Mandalorian Series 3, I want to say this. On my last podcast that I did on my review on Dungeons & Dragons and the Super Mario Bros. Film, which I loved, by the way, which I've now seen twice, I said at the end of that podcast that I won't have another podcast on this channel till May. However, it's April, and so I lied. I know, in fact, I didn't lie. I generally didn't think that I wouldn't have another podcast on this channel until May. I didn't think I'd have another video out till May or whatever, because I was, and I still am, writing my dissertation. However, because of the way things have worked out, I've basically got a day free today. So in my day off from writing my dissertation, I decided to do this podcast. So things worked out, and it's kind of a miracle that I am actually here recording this in April. But yes, this is kind of a one-off and very unexpected, but I'm very happy I'm here. But I won't have another podcast after this one, and this is the truth. I won't have another podcast after this one until most likely the first week of May, and my next podcast will probably be on Guardians of the Galaxy 3, which I'm really looking forward to. So yes, I won't have a podcast I won't have another podcast after this for a couple of weeks, but I'm looking forward to doing those podcasts, because then I will have my dissertation over with, because I'm still writing my dissertation. I haven't got it in yet, but I'm having a day off from it because of the way circumstances have happened. Let's just say that. But anyway, let's talk about what I said the topic was going to be in this podcast today. And you may have to sit with me, by the way. I will apologise off the bat. I'm very tired today. I've had barely any sleep last night. I had a terrible night's sleep. And of course, the past couple of weeks have been quite stressful for me. So my head is in a bit of a awkward space where it's just constantly spinning, so I may not make complete sense, but heck, that's just another video or podcast on this channel, so no difference there. But anyway, let's talk about Mandalorian Season 3. So, I'm not going to give a plot synopsis of Mandalorian Season 3. It's basically about the Mandalorians trying to take back Mandalore. That's essentially the setup for Mandalorian Season 3, and everything you need to know about this season in case you haven't watched this series yet. And honestly, here are my thoughts on Mandalorian Season 3. Sadly, this is, at least for me, the weakest season of Mandalorian yet. But saying that, though, I do think it's got a lot of perks, and I do think it's still very entertaining. And, I'm going to focus a lot on the perks in this video. I'm going to try and focus on the perks of this series of Mandalorian in this podcast today, because you're going to find a load of YouTube videos out about this season of Mandalorian, which are constantly going on about the negatives of this series. But in my opinion, there's still a lot of positives in there. Sure, it may be the weakest season of Mandalorian, but it had a lot of really great moments and some really good episodes. Like, I thought the first episode was great. It got me back into Mandalorian. I was like, oh yes, after Andor, which was the most recent Star Wars show before this, I was like, okay, Star Wars is very serious right now. What's the first episode of Mandalorian season 3? Okay, it's fun again. This is what I, not necessarily what I missed from Star Wars, but like this is what I missed from Mandalorian, that's what I'm saying, it reminded me of the Mandalorian feel, if you will. And then you get into the second and third episodes, and I thought they were fun. Then the series, it kind of loses itself in the middle. I'll go into that a bit later, but the last 2 episodes in particular were absolutely fantastic, though. I really, really enjoyed them. I mean, one thing I will say about the last episode, and kind of the second to last episode as well, or not as much, is it did feel very rushed. Pardon me. Now that's a bit of a shame because there's a lot of great moments in that last episode, a lot of great action sequences. There was no glaringly obvious fan service. There was a lot of really just exciting moments, especially if you're a Mandalorian fan. And yeah, I had a great time watching that last episode. I just wish it was longer than half an hour. I mean, if you went onto Disney Plus now, you'd see that the episode length says 41 minutes, but that also includes 7 minutes of credits. I don't know if a lot of people realise this. All these Star Wars Disney Plus shows, and Marvel Disney Plus shows at that, they all have 7 minutes worth of credits. So whenever you see the runtime for an episode of Disney Plus, you've got to take 7 minutes off, 7 to 10 minutes really, of what the actual runtime is. And so the runtime, even so it may say 41 minutes for the last episode, on Disney Plus, it's actually about half an hour. Which was a bit of a shame when I sat down to watch the episode. More like, oh, it's only half an hour? Oh, really? I wanted it to be a bit longer. Like, the last episode of season 2, from what I remember, was almost an hour, and it felt it. It was emotional, and it had moments where it breathed, and, I didn't really feel that as much in the last episode of Mandalorian Series 3. By the way, I'm not giving any spoilers, but I'm just saying that I didn't feel that the last episode of season 3 was the strongest, just simply because of the runtime. Like, I really, really enjoyed watching the episode, and I thought it was so much fun, wildly entertaining, everything like that. But I think it also would have been better if it was like 10 more minutes, and like in the end, and again, not giving them any spoilers here, but in the end, when you see what's happening to Din Djarin, aka the Mandalorian, and Baby Yoda, aka Grogu, and you see what's happening to them, and you see where they're going to end up by the end of the series, it feels almost like they go to one location, they go to another location. It was almost like Jon Favreau, who's a writer on this episode, he had a checklist going, okay, they have to do this, this, and then they can get there. That's what it felt like, and I don't think it totally worked, to be honest. Like, it did work, though, saying. I don't know what I'm saying. It did work, but I wish it worked better. That's what I'm saying. I wish it worked better, and I wish they took more time showing where the Mandalorian and Grogu were ending up. Because once, and I don't want to go into too much spoilers here, because I'm trying to keep at least the first part of this review spoiler free. Once the main stuff happened in that episode, in the last episode, it felt like everything else was almost a footnote, and which I didn't particularly love. But a lot of that episode I did love, and I did still really enjoy. The second to last episode I enjoyed very much. Now, the penultimate episode, the reason I enjoyed the second to last episode so much may have been because I watched it at Star Wars Celebration. Now, in the future, probably within the next month or so, I'm going to make a video talking about my experience at Star Wars Celebration, which I had a very good experience, by the way. But I just don't have time to talk about it at the moment. I haven't had time to talk about it yet either. So I will do a video about that in the future. But we got to see the second to last episode of Mandalorian Season 3, I think it was like 4 days earlier than everybody else, which was great. And the reason I loved that penultimate episode was because I watched it in this huge hall full of all these mega Star Wars fans, and every time something happened, they would cheer, they would get a bit emotional, and that second to last episode, again, not giving any spoilers yet, it just had a lot of moments where the crowd was cheering, you felt this excitement, which I just loved. I haven't actually rewatched that second to last episode of this series Mandalorian, just because I don't want my experience to be tainted. Like, I don't want to watch the episode and go, oh, actually it wasn't as good. Like, it was a really good episode when I was watching it, but I was also thinking while sitting in that hall and sitting on these really uncomfortable chairs, but not caring one moment, not caring about it whatsoever, that I was in these uncomfortable chairs. I was just loving the experience. I was thinking maybe I wouldn't love this episode as much if I wasn't, watching it in this huge crowd. But the fact is, I did watch it in this huge crowd. I did watch it in this huge crowd full of people who were, I'm not joking, standing up and cheering in certain parts. And so, yeah, that's one of the reasons I loved the second to last episode. It did have some really, really good moments with that episode as well, but I'm not sure if I would have loved it as much if I hadn't seen it at Star Celebration. I don't know, I might have, and probably one day I will sit down and rewatch the episode. But I'm a little bit scared for the moment because I don't want my experience to be tainted. I don't want to watch the episode and go, actually, it wasn't as good as I remember it being. But I loved watching the episode, though. That's the point I want to make. I loved watching the episode at Star Celebration, and that was an experience that I'm never, ever, ever going to forget. And also, the series is well directed still. Pardon me there. It's got a lot of really good direction, whether it's from Carl Weathers, who directed the episode The Foundling, which... that episode has some problems, but the direction is definitely not one of them. Bryce Dallas Howard directed an episode again this series. She directed an episode of series 1 of The Mandalorian. I think that was the very first thing she directed, by the way. And I remember the episode she directed. It was the one in the woods and everything like that. It was ACST. It was a really interesting episode. I really enjoyed watching that one. Then she directed an episode of Mandalorian Series 2, which I think she did a great job on. Then she directed the best episode of The Book of Boba Fett. The Book of Boba Fett was a series, by the way, which I enjoyed. When I look back on the Book of Boba Fett, I enjoyed that show, but I'm going to get on to some more thoughts on that show and how that kind of links to my thoughts of Mandalorian Season 3 again a bit later. But she directed the best episode of the Book of Boba Fett, which is the episode which reintroduced the Mandalorian and where he was at in his journey. That was a great episode which she directed. And she directed an episode again in this series. Now, I do think the episode she directed in this series of Mandalorian is probably the worst episode she's directed in Star Wars TV overall. However, I don't think that's down to her. I think she was working off a bad script. And I'm going to get onto that again a bit later. But Rick Famuyiwa, I think he directed 3 episodes. I think he directed the first, or was it second episode? I think he directed the second episode, actually, and he directed the last 2 episodes as well. And his episodes had this certain energy to them. They were well directed. They were tight as well. I really liked his direction. I'm really looking forward to seeing what Rick Famuyiwa does in the Star Wars universe going forward. Apparently he's also a producer on the series Mandalorian as well. And so, yeah, I'm glad that he's getting more involved in the Star Wars universe. Would have liked Dave Filoni or Jon Favreau to have directed an episode in the series, but I also know that Dave Filoni's been working on the Ahsoka TV show, so... I can excuse him for that. Bit surprised Jon Favreau didn't direct an episode, though. I know he's written all the episodes in this series, or co-written some of the episodes as well. But it's still, he directed, in my opinion, one of the best episodes of Mandalorian in Series 2. The one with the big worms, which felt very Dune-inspired. But at the same time, though, I was a bit surprised when I heard he didn't direct an episode of Mandalorian Series 3. Because he's a really good director, and he feels like... he's got a lot of input in the show. He's a writer on it. He's the main writer according to the credits of each episode, sorry. But at the same time, I was a bit surprised he didn't direct an episode. But anyway, also, I really liked the set designs. I really liked how it tried to take the show in a bit of a different direction. I think it's episode 3, episode 4. There's one episode which focuses on... ex-Empire employees, people who used to work for the Empire in Coruscant, and I really liked that episode. Now, I didn't love that episode, but I liked it more because they tried to do something different with Mandalorian. I like when shows, when they're into their 3rd, 4th, whatever series, when they've been going for a bit now, they try to do something different, and Mandalorian Series 3 did that with an episode on Coruscant. Granted, I think that episode would work better if it was more confident in its direction and storytelling, but it was still an interesting episode, though. Seeing this different side of Mandalorian almost, maybe not Mandalorian, but just seeing this different side of storytelling from Jon Favreau. That's what I'm trying to say. That seeing this different side of storytelling from Jon Favreau, where it felt very Andor inspired. Like, it almost felt like Jon Favreau, he was watching Andor and thought, I want to have an episode like that, but I can't get Tony Gilroy, the show on Andor, to come and do an episode, so I'm going to have to try and do one myself. And I'm not sure if it totally worked. It should have been more confident in its storytelling and writing, but I applaud that the show was trying to do something different with that episode. You play another episode with me, and hopefully you do. But I applaud that it's trying to do something different. Do I think it totally worked? No. But I'm happy that they tried that. And also, I love the way they reincorporated Ahmed Best back into the Star Wars universe. I think that's how I pronounce his name. Apologies if it's not. But Ahmed Best played Jar Jar Binks in the Star Wars prequels, one of the most hated characters in movie history. And so the fact that they brought Ahmed Best back, but didn't have him playing Jar Jar, and instead had him playing the Jedi who saved Baby Yoda, aka Grogu, was such a wonderful thing in my opinion. Like, I didn't even realise who it was straight away. Then, about 30 seconds after watching him be reintroduced, but after watching Ahmed Best's character being introduced into the series, I'm like, oh, it's him! It's him, and I just love the way that they brought him back and made him into a character that everyone loved instead of a character that everyone hated, like what happened with Jar Jar Binks. And also, the music for the series is good. It's by Joseph Shirley. Ludwig Göransson doing the score this time because Ludwig Göransson is working on the score for Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer, which comes out very shortly, by the way, which I'm really looking forward to. But Joseph Shirley, who I think is a student, by the way, of Ludwig Göransson, did the score this time, and I think the score was good. I don't think it's got as many memorable themes as, say, Ludwig Göransson brought to the Mandalorian series 1 and 2. I don't think his themes are particularly memorable. I think the score worked for what it needs to do. It was still action-packed, it was still energetic, it still gave me the feels in certain parts, like when Moff Gideon's theme played, when Moff Gideon showed back up, I really like that. And also, I love the way that the Mandalorian theme was used in certain moments in certain episodes. But I also wish that this series of Mandalorian had more memorable themes. Maybe it does, maybe I just haven't heard them yet, but I still remember watching that first series of Mandalorian and hearing Moff Gideon's theme for the first time, and literally it blew me away. And then I listened to that theme so many times on Spotify since, and none of the themes in this series of Mandalorian have had that same effect with me yet. So, it's still a good score, not as good as the previous score for, Mandalorian series 1 and 2, but still good. And this series has a lot of great moments. It really does. But that's the problem. I've taken 17 minutes to get to the problem of Mandalorian Season 3. The problem is that it does have a narrative through line. It does. It does have this narrative drive about taking back Mandalore and everything like that. But it isn't as focused as it could be. This is the most unfocused series of Mandalorian, and that's its problem. It doesn't really feel confident with the story it's telling this time. In fact, it feels rushed, and it feels as well like Jon Favreau, who wrote every episode of the series, sometimes co-wrote some of the episodes. It felt like he's getting bored of Star Wars. It felt like he's getting exhausted in the Star Wars universe, because he wrote and directed, some of the amazing episodes from the first 2 seasons of Mandalorian. And I don't care what anyone says. When I look back on the Book of Boba Fett, I enjoyed that show. It had more wins for me than losses. But the Book of Boba Fett should have been a lot better. It should have been Sopranos meets Star Wars, and it wasn't. It had some really good moments and some episodes that I loved and some ideas that I loved. Pardon me, but ultimately the Book of Boba Fett was underwhelming, even though I still enjoyed it. But now with Mandalorian Season 3, I feel more than ever, and maybe this is just me, but I feel more than ever that Jon Favreau is getting bored of Star Wars. He's getting exhausted doing the writing and doing these sort of TV shows now, because the Book of Boba Fett started to show that, but I thought that maybe the Book of Boba Fett started to show that because I felt that the Book of Boba Fett was rushed. I felt, and this maybe just me, again, just speculating, I don't know if it's absurd, but I felt that, Kathleen Kennedy heard the reaction to Boba Fett in Mandalorian Season 2 and went, give him a TV show now. Give him a TV show now, until he rushed production on that, and it wasn't well thought through, it wasn't well planned, and it didn't end up being that good. And I think that was why, because it was rushed. But also, I feel the same about Mandalorian Season 3. I feel that the production was rushed, and I'm not blaming Kathleen Kennedy, although maybe it was her. I don't know. I don't know, it just feels like this series was rushed. And here's my theory about this series of Mandalorian. This isn't a theory about the story, I don't mean anything like that, but where the story's going to go in the future, because we all kind of know that. Dave Filoni is meant to be directing a movie for 2026, that's when it's rumoured to come out, which is going to wrap all these stories through the Mandalorian, Ahsoka, Boba Fett, and so on and so on and so on, which is going to wrap all these stories up in a movie that's coming out further down the line. I don't mean about the story. My theory is about production. My theory is that the 2 episodes based around Mandalorian in the Book of Boba Fett were meant to be in this series of Mandalorian. But they heard the reaction, the people at Lucasfilm heard the reaction to Mandalorian, breaking away from Grogu, aka Baby Yoda, at the end of Mandalorian Season 2 and went, okay, we need to have these characters get back together as soon as possible, instead of waiting and bringing them back together in this series. Because that's also one of my big problems as well. The fact that the father-son storyline with Baby Yoda and Mandalorian isn't as present in this series of Mandalorian as it has been. Like, don't get me wrong, I really enjoyed that this series had more focus on Bo-Katan. She's a really interesting character. Kate Stackpole plays her really well. I really, really, really like that character. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is I do feel that Mandalorian and Grogu were put on the back burner of this series, and I feel it's because they didn't really know what to do with them. I feel that there was some interference, and there's interference on every single big budget film, blockbuster, and also these big budget TV shows regardless anyway. But I do feel there's some interference that perhaps for some reason forced Mandalorian and Grogu to reunite in the Book of Boba Fett instead of Mandalorian Season 3. And I feel that was a misstep, because even though I loved their reunion in the Book of Boba Fett, it would have worked so much better here, because a lot of people as well who watched the first 2 seasons of Mandalorian, I didn't really realise this, but a lot of people who watched those first 2 seasons of Mandalorian didn't watch the Book of Boba Fett, and so they were confused when Mando was reunited with Grogu just out of the blue at the start of the series of Mandalorian, and that made me think, was that intentional then? I reckon that those 2 episodes based around Mandalorian and Grogu from the Book of Boba Fett, and again, this is me speculating, but I reckon those 2 episodes, was it 2 episodes? It might even be more actually, but I reckon those episodes from the Book of Boba Fett were meant to be in the series of Mandalorian, because there are filler episodes in this season of Mandalorian which are very poorly written. This is what I mean by Jon Favreau getting exhausted with Star Wars. There's one episode called The Foundling, which is directed by Carl Weathers, really well directed by Carl Weathers, by the way. I'm not dissing him, not criticising his direction whatsoever, but there's one episode called The Foundling which is so poorly written. Now, I enjoyed watching the episode, but it makes no sense. Right, at the start of this episode, right, you see all the Mandalorians training together on this beach where this big monster has come out before the start of the series. So you're like, okay, why are they back on this beach? Okay, what about if another monster comes out? And then sure enough, when all of these Mandalorians are training together, another big monster comes out. Not from the water this time, but from the sky. This big bird monster comes out and takes one of the Mandalorian kids away. And then the big Mandalorian, one with the big gunner, he's like, that's my kid, I want to go and get him back as soon as possible, I can't wait any longer. So him, alongside Din Djarin, aka the Mandalorian, and Bo-Katan, and I think the armor as well, I might be wrong, they all go and get this Mandalorian kid back. And because it's the son of the big Mandalorian, one of the big gunner, everything like that, a really, really tough one. And then they go on to get the kid back, but then they decide to wait till the morning. Even so, they're so desperate to get this kid back as soon as possible, they're going to wait till the morning, and they're going to have this campfire underneath the nest of this big bird. And I'm just saying, they're going, what? But the bird would see the fire, it would see the smoke, wouldn't it? It would smell the smoke. But anyway, they decide to have this campfire underneath the nest, and then they finally decide the next morning to go and get this kid back. And they go, we're going to have a surprise attack on this nest. And then it's not a surprise because the bird only knows it's coming because he just had a campfire underneath this. But they're following the night before, and they go to get this Mandalorian kid back. And then apparently the Mandalorian kid hasn't been digested yet. And the big bird creature just throws the Mandalorian kid up. And literally, you're sitting there going, wait, what? how long was this night, by the way? How long were they asleep? Because if they were asleep 12 hours, then how come the big bird didn't digest the young Mandalorian kid? Alright, but also, why didn't they go to get the big bird? Why didn't they go to kill the big bird and get the Mandalorian kid back during the night? Because wouldn't that work better if they wanted to do a surprise attack? Why did they have a campfire? What was that episode? Honestly, it felt like that episode was meant to be one of the episodes of Mandalorian from the Book of Boba Fett, but they changed things up, and Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni, he was a writer on this episode as well. This episode was co-written by both those two, Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni. It felt like the night before that episode went into production, Kathleen Kennedy sent these two off and said, "Well, you need to write a filler episode here," and they had one night in a hotel room to write this episode because it made no sense whatsoever. I mean, that episode was entertaining, and I love seeing Ahmed back in that episode as well. I love seeing what happened to Grogu after the events of Order 66. I liked that part in the episode, but everything else with the big bird was just rubbish. It made no sense. Although it wasn't rubbish though, because it was still kind of entertaining. I'm not sure why. Maybe it's because of Carl Weathers' direction, because he did save a lot of the episode in the direction. But the whole stuff with the bird, the more I think about it, the more it's just so dumb. The writing was just so poor. And then, again, more evidence as to Jon Favreau's perhaps bored and exhaustive nature in the Star Wars universe was with the episode that consisted of Jack Black, Lizzo, and Christopher Lloyd. Now, everybody seems to be complaining about this episode online, so I'm not going to go into too much detail on this episode. But the thing is, right, this episode, it's got Jack Black in. I love Jack Black so much ever since I saw him in that King Kong film, which came out in 2005, which is directed by Peter Jackson, and ever since I saw him in School of Rock. And I love him as Bowser as well, and his Peach song from the Super Mario Bros. Movie. Pardon me, he is amazing in the Super Mario Bros. Film, and yeah, I love I can't speak. I love Jack Black so much. Lizzo, I'm not a huge fan of, just because I'm not a huge fan of the pop genre in general, the musical pop genre. I'm just not a huge fan of it. Although I don't really know Lizzo's music, I've never really listened to it. About a week ago, I came across her song Juice, and I quite enjoyed that song. So yeah, I don't mind Lizzo, and I don't mind her music. And who doesn't love Christopher Lloyd? Christopher Lloyd, who played Doc in the Back to the Future films. Great Scott! I love him so much. But the problem with having those actors in that episode is it wasn't done. It took me out of the episode. The cameos should have been done in a more Star Wars fashion, like Daniel Craig in The Force Awakens. There's still a lot of people who don't know Daniel Craig was actually in The Force Awakens, because he played a First Order trooper that Rey, tricked with her Jedi mind tricks, which I just thought was brilliant. Well, I didn't know it was Daniel Craig straight away, and when I heard it, I was like, oh my god, that was Daniel Craig. That was awesome as a Star Wars cameo. Bill Hader voiced BB-8 in The Force Awakens as well, and then also you had Thomas Brodie Sangster in The Force Awakens. You had all these cameos in The Force Awakens that you didn't really know about, because either they were only on screen for like a couple of seconds, or they were in a costume, or whenever Lloyd Davis has a cameo in a Star Wars film, more often than not you don't know it's Lloyd Davis, because he's either in all these prosthetics like he is in The Phantom Menace, or he's in some costume like he was in The Force Awakens, or like he is in The Rise of Skywalker and The Return of the Jedi. That's what I love about cameos in Star Wars. Cameos where you don't actually know it's them until you look at some trivia website or on IMDb after. That's what I love. That's the sort of Star Wars cameos I love. The cameos I don't love are the ones like Jack Black in this show, when he literally just looks like Jack Black does now. And I can't differentiate between the character Jack Black is meant to be playing and Jack Black in real life, if you get what I mean. I'm watching it going, okay, that's Jack Black, and now you're taking me out of it. That's Lizzo, you're taking out me even more. That's Christopher Lloyd, and it just looks like Christopher Lloyd is taking me out of this episode even more now. It just really took me out of it. And also, that episode is, again, poorly written. It's well directed by Bryce Dallas Howard. Her direction was probably the best part of that episode. And also the Darksaber thing at the end of the episode as well, I quite enjoyed. But the rest of that episode was just... it was bad. And I hate to say this, I really do, because I loved the first 2 seasons of Mandalorian, and there's so many parts of this series of Mandalorian that I love as well. But this was the first episode of Mandalorian that I just straight up didn't like because of the cameos that took me out of it, and because of the writing, which was just so poor and felt again much like the Foundling episode, like it was just done the night before, like not so much thought was put into it, and it just shocks me sometimes from the writing with this show, because Jon Favreau has proven that he can write so well the first two seasons of Mandalorian, and the Book of Boba Fett, say all about it, but I still contest that the Book of Boba Fett had some absolutely brilliant writing. I don't care what anybody says. And this series Mandalorian does as well. But it doesn't change the fact that it's also got some poor writing. And I think those two episodes in particular really show the exhaustive side of Jon Favreau and his writing for Star Wars. And honestly, I kind of wanted to move away from this now. I think he's an amazing job. And I think when people look back on Jon Favreau's Star Wars, they'll look back on him and say, look how good of a job he did. But the fact that he's already written Mandalorian season 4 worries me. Because season 3, felt exhaustive. It didn't feel as tight and as... It just didn't feel as Star Warsy as the first two seasons did. And that really... that really upset me a bit, because I love those first two seasons of Mandalorian so much, and to be honest, there's not really an episode in those first two seasons that I don't like. I mean, there's an episode in the first series which I think is a bit naff, the episode in the cantina which introduces thirty-seocnd. You know, I didn't really like that episode too much, but it had its moments. But with the exception of the last 5 minutes of that episode of Series 3 with Jack Black, Lizzo and Christopher Lloyd, the rest of that episode was just, it annoyed me, to be honest, because literally the episode beforehand, they're setting up that all the Mandalorians now, Bo-Katan and Din Djarin together, and they're going to go and take back Mandalore. And then the start of the episode that I'm talking about, Jack Black, the start of that episode, it sets up that they're going to get more Mandalorians to help them along their adventure. But then, to just go and do a mini adventure, almost like it's a video game, and... it really didn't work for me. I don't know if you can tell. And also, I just think this series as a whole of Mandalorian needs to be more confident in its storytelling. It feels very much right now that the series is shy what it's doing. It's shy doing anything new in the Star Wars universe, anything new with the series of Mandalorian, because pardon me there again, sorry, even when they do try and do things new, like that episode which focused on the ex-Empire employees, it still has a bit of Mandalorian action in there. Like the start of the episode starts with this big action sequence, the TIE fighters on Mandalorian ship, and it's a great action sequence, but then it's almost like they had to put that there to please Mandalorian fans because they're a bit scared of trying to do anything new. And I feel that if you're going to try something new, do it with confidence. It may not work, but at least they will be doing it with confidence. Andor didn't work for some people because it didn't feel Star Wars, because they tried something different. But the thing is with Andor, one thing you cannot comment against that film is the fact that that TV show tried doing something different. It tried doing something different in the Star Wars universe. Didn't work for everybody, but it worked for me masterfully. Same with The Last Jedi. Say all about The Last Jedi, hate it, love it, whatever. But that film was confident in trying to do things differently. And I feel that Mandalorian wasn't confident enough, and I also feel that the filler episodes really expose that Jon Favreau is getting tired of writing Star Wars TV. Because the thing is, I'm not saying that the previous two seasons of The Mandalorian didn't have filler episodes. They did, definitely. I remember some quite well. There's that one episode where Mandalorian was doing sort of like a heist job. The first episode with Bill Burr in the first series. That was a full episode. In the second series, we had the episode with the Ice Spiders. But the thing is, that episode with the Ice Spiders was great in my opinion because it was intense and it just focused. It still had The Mandalorian and Grogu as its main focus. It didn't go away from anything else going on. Well, it did, but at the same time, though, it still had them in the main focus, and the episode was still well written, and it was intense, and it was well directed. But I didn't feel that with the episodes in this series. Not that the full episodes were badly directed, but they weren't as well constructed as that Ice Spider episode in Mandalorian Season 2. And I understand some people didn't like that episode of Mandalorian Season 2, by the way. But I remember... That's one of my favourite episodes of Mandalorian, because I remember sitting there, watching that episode at about 8 o'clock in the morning, literally clutching to the edge of my seat. And I haven't had that of an episode of Mandalorian since, because... God, I just loved that episode so much. It was so well directed and so well constructed. Had a bit of aliens in there. Yeah, it was great, that Ice Spider episode. And I haven't felt that, though, with any of these filler episodes in this series. In this series of Mandalorian. I'm fine with filler episodes, just as long as they're done well. You know, not every episode has to contribute to the overall plot of the series. But when this series of Mandalorian is... going from bit to bit so much, it does feel unfocused though. Like, even though the previous few seasons of Mandalorian, even though they did have their filler episodes, the story still felt focused. It still felt like the series had a narrative drive, and I feel that Mandalorian Season 3 has lost a lot of that. The father-son relationship with Mandalorian and Grogu, which tricked you into watching the show initially. Like, I remember when the first series of Mandalorian was coming out, and I remember hearing, it's a show about this bounty hunter called Mandalorian, and I was like, really? That doesn't sound interesting to me. Yeah, I'm not really sold on this. But then I remember hearing all these amazing things about it, and so I finally got Disney Plus, and I was like, don't really want to get Disney Plus, but I've got it now because there's so many good things about the Mandalorian. 3 episodes into the first series of Mandalorian, I was hooked. I remember watching it and loving it so much. I'm like, this is great. Now I'm going to have to keep Disney Plus. That's the power of what one TV show can do for you. But right now, I'm missing that father-son relationship focus in The Mandalorian. It's still there. There are still moments of that father-son bond between Mandalorian and Grogu, but it's not as zoned in on as it could be, like it was in the first 2 series. There's some moments of it, like in the last 2 episodes, which I really, really enjoyed, but yeah, it's losing its focus. That's my problem with this series of Mandalorian. It's losing its focus, and I think it's starting to show that Jon Favreau is getting a bit exhausted with Star Wars. I mean, maybe he isn't. Maybe the next thing he writes, Star Wars-wise, I don't know what the next thing he's written on, whether he's written on Ahsoka, he might have, maybe he's written on Skeleton Crew or whatever, whatever the next thing that comes out that he's written in the Star Wars universe, maybe it comes out and it's great, but I'm not going to hold my breath. I'm not going to hold my breath. But saying all that though, I still did have a really good time in this series, and I think people don't give Mandalorian enough credit for being what it is, entertaining. It is a fun and entertaining show. A lot of people saying that this series of Mandalorian isn't as good as Andor. And although I would agree, I also don't want every single Star Wars TV show to be like Andor. Andor is one of my favourite TV shows. One of my favourite TV shows last year as well. But the thing is that it's also a very serious show, and at times it's very dark. And I don't want all my Star Wars to be like that. Just like I don't want all my Star Wars to be like Mandalorian as well. And so the fact that we have these varied shows, we can have an Andor, we can have an Obi-Wan, which I know everyone didn't love, but just kind of goes towards my point that I'm making. The fact that we can have an Andor, the fact that we can have an Obi-Wan, the fact that we can have a Mandalorian, the fact that they are all different in their own sort of way, I'm really happy about. And so, yeah, this series of Mandalorian isn't as well written as, Andor, and Mandalorian in general isn't well written as first season of Andor, but that's fine in my opinion, because although I loved Andor to pieces, I don't want every single Star Wars TV show to be like Andor. And I don't understand that criticism. Like, Mandalorian is his own thing, and I enjoy watching fun Star Wars sometimes. Even so, sometimes the writing is poor, and even so, it can be stupid, like that one episode called The Foundling. It can still be really, really fun. And that episode was fun, It was just an entertaining show still. It's still entertaining, and I'm still happy with this series because it ended on a strong note, and it still had more good episodes than bad episodes in my opinion. In fact, this series only really had one bad episode, the episode with Jack Black, Lizzo and Christopher Lloyd, That was the only bad episode in my opinion, but the rest of the series, even the episode called The Foundling, which was poorly written, was still entertaining. And also that episode where the Mandalorians kill the pirates, that was still an entertaining episode. The last 2 episodes of this show were wildly entertaining. And I love the way they leave Mandalorian and Grogu's story. A part of me thinks as well, and mild spoilers here in case you haven't seen the last episode of Mandalorian yet, but a part of me thinks as well that they might leave Mandalorian's story here. Like, I know Jon Favreau's come out and said that they've already written Mandalorian Season 4, but it wasn't announced at Star Celebration. Ahsoka was talked about, Acolyte was talked about, Skeleton Crew was talked about, and those other Star Wars projects which is talked about as well, including the Dave Filoni film, which is going to wrap up all this stuff in the Mandalorian universe, if you will, or the Mandalorian adjacent stuff. But there hasn't been a series 4 Mandalorian announced yet, and I thought there was going to be a post-credit scene on this series of Mandalorian in the last episode, and there wasn't. I thought it was going to be something setting up this series. I mean, for all I know, maybe Mandalorian shows been Ahsoka. It's meant to be taking place at the same time, so that's not completely... it wouldn't be completely out of left field. And also, maybe Mandalorian show's been Skeleton Crew. That's meant to be taking place around the same time. I don't know. Maybe, and this is just wildly guessing now, wildly speculating, maybe Mandalorian shows up in, I don't know, Acolyte. That's not going to happen. But you understand the point I'm making. Maybe there's something happening in Mandalorian behind the scenes that we just don't know yet. But I was a bit surprised that they didn't announce the series 4. Even though it's apparently written, Jon Favreau came out and said, yeah, it is written, I've written season 4. I'm surprised that they didn't announce that. And part of me thinks, and I'm not saying I want this to happen, because I love watching The Mandalorian still, I still get excited about it, but part of me thinks that Mandalorian story's ended. I don't know, maybe not. And also, one other thing that I want to say is that I just didn't feel that emotionally invested into this series anymore. And that's a bit of a shame. Like, I remember when Luke showed up at the end of Mandalorian Season 2, and I was so happy. I was almost in tears because of my joy, and I didn't have a moment like that in this series. There was so much emotional build to that as well, and I miss that in this series of Mandalorian. And I do think that is in part, again, down to the fact that Grogu and Mandalorian aren't at the centre. Their bond isn't at the centre of this show anymore. The centre of the show, the centre of this series, Mandalorian in particular, feels very much like it's about Mandalore and about, you know, the Mandalorians coming together, which is an interesting idea. I just didn't find that compelling though. But still, I miss Mandalorian and Grogu stuff. I wish Grogu had more of a story in the series. And I should say, Bo-Katan is great. I really like that character, and Kate Sackhoff plays it fantastically. And I really enjoy the stuff with the Mandalorians. I just don't enjoy it as much as I enjoy the stuff with Grogu and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, I still enjoyed this series overall. Sure, it is the weakest series of Mandalorian yet, but it's still got a lot of great moments, and I don't think people are crediting that enough. And although it is the weakest series of Mandalorian, I enjoyed it. And I just want to reiterate that because, yeah, I want to focus on the positives as well. I enjoyed this series, even if it was a step down, because there were still many great moments. Like the end of the second to last episode, so many great moments in the last episode. The first episode was started with a bang, you know, it had some great moments. Second episode, great. Third episode, great. I think it was third episode. Yeah, third episode was great. Fourth episode, yeah, not so much. Fifth episode, yes. Sixth episode, not so much. But seventh episode, yes. And eighth episode, yes as well. And actually, you know what? The sixth episode, wasn't the sixth episode? No, sorry, the fourth episode was so good. I don't care. Yeah, it was good. Even if it made no sense. And I've been rambling way too much now. I enjoyed the series of Mandalorian, and I still think it's an entertaining show. And I'm excited to see where the Mandalorian story goes next. Whether it's with Din Djarin and Grogu or not. And so, all in all, I'm going to say that Mandalorian Season 3, I'm going to say that it's a 7.5 out of 10. Much like the Book of Boba Fett, when I look back on Mandalorian Season 3, I reckon it will have more wins for me than losses. In fact, when I look back at it now, to be honest, I think I liked Mandalorian Season 3 more than the Book of Boba Fett. And I'm happy about that. I'm just hoping somebody else comes in to write the next season or something like that, which is going to be a fresh air with the Mandalorian TV show now if it decides to continue. I don't know if it will, maybe it will, maybe it won't. But it's still got a lot of great moments. I don't care what anyone says. It does. It really does. Like, the first episode had a really great... what am I trying to say off the top of my head? Had a really great space battle in there. The second episode, the whole stuff with the Mythosaur and exploring Mandalore, Bo-Katan, and the Mandalorian. Granted, the Mythosaur may have been a bit of a missed opportunity, I'm not gonna lie, but maybe they got plans for it in the future, so I don't know, but it feels right now like a bit of a missed opportunity. Episode 3, I think that was the episode with the ex-Empire employees. I quite enjoyed that episode, even though it wasn't as confident as it could have been. Episode 4 was one with the Foundling. Poorly written episode, but well directed, and I loved that it got Ahmed best in there, so I enjoyed the episode overall, even though it made no sense. Episode 5 was one where they killed all the pirates and saved Carl Weathers' land and everything like that. Really enjoyed that episode as well. Some great action in there and a lot of just really fun and exciting moments. I watched that episode the day after coming back from a holiday, and I was like really tired. I remember watching that episode going, oh yeah, this is exactly what I need right now. And I reckon I'll feel the same if I watched it again now. Episode 6 was the first episode of Mandalorian that I straight up just didn't like, but you can't love every episode of a show you watch. You can. Some episodes are going to be better than others, so even if I didn't like the episode, yeah, it is what it is. Episode 7, had an amazing time watching, so I'm just going to leave that there, Probably doesn't want to rewatch that episode because of the amazing experience I had watching it, but I did have an amazing experience watching it, and I'm going to keep that with me. And the last episode, although it did feel a bit rushed, it was still a solid episode though, and still a good finale. Probably the weakest of all the Mandalorian finales, but yeah, still wildly entertaining to watch, and that's how I feel. That's how that's how I feel about this season of Mandalorian as a whole. It's the weakest season of Mandalorian. I know I said it before, but I'm going to say it again. It's the weakest season of Mandalorian, but that's saying something because I still had a wildly entertaining time watching this series for the most part, and I'm going to take that with me. Yes, I am. And so, all in all, I'm going to say that Mandalorian Season 3, I'm going to say that's a 7.5 out of 10 from me. Anyway, guys, thank you as always for watching, because this is it now. This is the end of the podcast. So I've been a bit all over the place, like I mentioned before. Didn't get too much sleep last night, and have had a very stressful experience recently. But hopefully it made sense, and hopefully I didn't ramble too much. Sometimes when I'm listening back to these podcasts or doing some editing on these podcasts or videos or whatsoever, I'm kind of like, oh god, I rambled, don't I? So apologies if I rambled too much in this video today. But nevertheless, like I said before, but I'm going to say it again, thank you as always for watching or listening. And if you haven't yet, please do click down below and like and subscribe on this podcast, wherever you are watching or listening to it. And also, thank you for checking this podcast out. Again, losing already. Thank you for checking the podcast out. If you haven't checked out some of my other podcasts as well, go and do so now whilst you wait for my next podcast, probably coming in about 2 weeks or so. Next week I'm still going to be busy, but look forward to 2 weeks time. I'll hopefully have my next podcast out, but hopefully you enjoyed this one, and look forward to my next coming in 2 weeks time. I'm just repeating myself on over and over again. Okay, yes, thank you so much for watching. I'm going to leave it now. And I suppose it's, so I'll see you guys again soon. But bye for now. One of the worst outros I've ever done to a video. Bye.